Folks, Scott here with the new My Monthly Hero January 2021 kit. This is the first My Monthly Hero kit of our brand new year 2021. Happy New Year! This kit is all about bees, honeycombs, and honey and flowers. Let's dig in right away. Our 6 by 8 inch stamp set has lots of sentiments, this great big spray of flowers, a couple of simple single blooms, looks like 3 bees in various positions, a little honeycomb stamp, the inner fill-in part of that honeycomb stamp, and lots of sentiments. Of course, we've got some good puns here. I believe in love, I believe in you, sweet as can be, sweet as honey, hi there, I've pollen head over heels for you, you're beautiful, we belong together. Of course, lots of puns available for bees. I really like those bees. You know, I looked through my stash and I have no bee stamps whatsoever, so I'm really thrilled to get this kit. These are really cute, really chunky honeybees. We do get matching dies with this kit. Our coordinating frame cuts will cut the 2 flower blooms and the large spray of flowers, and also those 3 bees as well. And we also get this honeycomb window die. So it won't cut the outline, it will cut the inside line and cut out all of those honeycomb shapes. So it's a window die, a honeycomb window die. That's our stamps and dies. And we do get a pack of extras with our kit as well. We get a new lacquer pen, which says it is honey lacquer. Says supposedly will look like honey. I imagine it doesn't taste like honey though. And then we get some cardstocks and papers. We get 2 sheets, 8.5 by 5.5 of black glitter, 2 sheets of pale yellow glitter, and 2 sheets of gold brilliance paper. This is actually a little thinner than the cardstocks, a little thicker than paper. This is probably maybe 40 pounds or something, but really pretty gold and black extra papers in our kit. That's everything in our My Monthly Hero January 2021 kit. Let's make some cards. And here we have my 10 cards made with this fun bee-themed My Monthly Hero kit. Everything under white card bases. Oh, except there's one pink card base there for all my pink fans out there. Of course, I was initially drawn to this great honeycomb window die to begin with, so that prompted my first card, and we have an I Believe in You card. That nice shiny gold paper and that great window die there. And of course, those great chubby little bees. I love those bee stamps. Now this didn't start like this. This went through a few permutations. Originally, I took a piece of Nina Solar White 110-pound cardstock and I did a dry embossing of that honeycomb window die. That worked really good, gave us a great dimension, but I didn't care for it on white whatsoever. So I decided to do some ink smooshing. I never do ink smooshing, but I thought, oh, that should look good as a background on this. So I ink smooshed a white panel that had been embossed with fossilized amber, wild honey, and frayed burlap distress oxide inks. That gave me this great background here. I love that. I'm going to have to do more ink smooshing. I thought that came out really nice. A good combination of colors there. One problem, though, was that by ink smooshing, I was not able to get color into the embossed edges of this die. So I said, okay, well, let's just go ahead and die cut that out. So I took that die, and it was easy to pop it back into place and die cut it on that ink smooshed background. I cut that down to 4 inches by 5 1/4 and then mounted that on a 4 1/4 by 5 1/2 inch piece of that gold brilliance specialty paper we got in our kit. Lovely gold background there. Glued those down to a white card base. I stamped the sentiment, I believe in you, using Hero Art's intense black ink, and I embossed that with some clear embossing powder so it has a little shine too. This bee, almost all the bees in this set I stamped using Hero Art's Intense Black ink on some Neenah 110-pound cardstock, and then colored those with my Spectrum Noir alcohol markers. I believe I colored all of these with the Golden Yellow 135 and then an True Blue 1 for a little color in their wings. I also added just a touch of sparkle in their wings with my Spectrum Noir sparkle pen. I die cut the bee with the included die and mounted him with some foam tape in the middle of that window. I believe in you. I believe this is what Hero Arts had in mind when they came up with this stamp set. Really pretty. I am definitely going to have to play with ink smooshing some more. So that honeycomb window die was still capturing my attention after that first card, and I wondered if there was a way that I could get some real depth to that window die and maybe approximate how a real beehive might look. On my second card, we've got Sweet as Honey, a Sweet as Honey honeycomb card. Oh, this is nice. I love all the dimension in this. I took 3 just plain A2 panels of Neenah 110-pound cardstock, and I cut the window die in 3 different directions on all 3 pieces. So I started with the top piece was cut in this direction, and then I cut the second piece. I turned it 60 degrees, so the second piece is then cut in this orientation. And I tried to keep my top hexagon about a ½ inch away from the top panel of the card. I turned it again another 60 degrees and then die cut the third panel. And all 3 of those layered on top of each other gave us this really nice dimension, kind of a real honeycomb beehive type of effect there. Once I stacked them all up and decided that I liked where those had been die cut, I took those same golden yellow 1, 3, and 5 markers and colored up all 3 of these panels with my alcohol markers. So we've got golden yellow 1 on the front, golden yellow 3 on the middle, and golden yellow 5 on the back one. That gave us some nice depth and dimension as the colors get darker as it goes back through there. I grabbed a scrap of my old Auburn Pearl cardstock, cut a panel of that to go behind the windows. I also took that hexagon outline stamp and I stamped that on that back panel in the middle. I stamped that a number of times using archival acorn ink. I needed some permanent ink to go down because this is pearlized paper. So I stamped that a number of times. You can see those hexagons in the background there. I also glued down 3 little hexagon die cuts that were colored the same as the panels, just for a little variety in the back. I glued the background panel, the darkest panel, straight down to my Auburn pearlized cardstock piece and glued both of those down to a white card base. And then I added the second layer and the top layer using foam tape. Using foam tape all around the edges to add a little depth and dimension to that. I stamped and colored and die cut my bee here the same as my first bee, although I added some gold yellow 1 around the edges to blend in a little more with our front panel. I stamped the sentiment here using Intense Black ink and embossed that as well with some clear embossing powder. Now look at all the honey dripping from those honeycombs. I've even got a drop of honey coming off of the T on Sweet as Honey. I took that honey lacquer that came in our kit and I actually drew these on my glass media mat, trying to make drips on my glass media mat and just let them dry there. I didn't want to try that directly on the card, so I did a bunch of them on my glass media mat. Once they were dry, I was able to pop them off my glass media mat and glue them directly to the card front here. I added some little extra touches of that honey lacquer in some of those background hexagons there. Now it's nice and sticky and sweet as honey. That lacquer pen really looks like honey dripping from all of those honeycombs. And I really like that sense of a beehive that we got using 3 layers of that honeycomb window dye. Okay, let's start stamping here. We've got some great flower stamps, that great branch of flowers, and some single bloom stamps. For our third card, we've got Hi There. And on the inside, give me a buzz. It goes along perfectly with hi there, doesn't it? Now, I stamped the branch of flowers on the top and bottom of a card panel using Hero Art's Thistle Reactive ink and embossed that with some clear embossing powder. Then I added the profile bloom on the 2 sides, again stamped with the Thistle ink and embossed with clear embossing powder. I die cut that panel with a L'Enfant stitched rectangle die, glued them down to a thin black glitter mat and a thin light yellow glitter mat, and then glued those down to my white card base. I stamped, colored, and die cut my 2 bees the exact same way. There's a little sparkle in their wings there too. And I was playing around with putting them on this card front when I started feeling like the flowers were a little naked. I thought they needed some color in them, but I didn't want to color them up completely. I just wanted a hint of color. So before I glued the bees down to the card front, I reached for my Pebbles chalk palette. This is a really nice, I've had this for a long time. I don't use it very often, but if you really want a really soft and light touch of color, these work really well. They have little pom-poms for each color and a little tool to pick up the pom-poms. I used some of this purple chalk on the centers of my flowers, used a little bit of the green chalk on some of the leaves. Just a touch of color was just what this card needed. I added some foam tape to my die-cut bumblebees and added those to the card front. I didn't want to skip out on this cute little hi there sentiment. You know, I do try to use all of the stamps in a stamp set, and that includes all of the sentiments as well. I didn't want to forget that little hi there stamp, and I thought it went along perfectly with the give me a buzz. I just printed this on a scrap of cardstock. This is the Lucida Grand font. I trimmed that down to a little panel and glued that on the inside of the card. Hi there, give me a buzz. Really cute. Those chubby bees are to die for, or at least get stung for. Okay, I figured if I use that large branch of blooms with just the tiniest touches of color in it, I should hunker down and color one of those seriously. For my next card, we've got You're Beautiful, with that beautiful branch of flowers on the side here. I stamped that again using the intense black ink on a piece of Nina Solar White cardstock, and I colored those with my Spectrum Noir alcohol markers, and then I die cut that branch out using the matching frame cut. I figured out where I wanted that branch to go on my card front by putting this sentiment down here. I angled it a little bit with just enough room for the sentiment and a bee on the right here. I stamped the sentiment directly on the card front using Hero Art's intense black ink, and I did emboss that with a little bit of clear embossing powder. I love doing that to my sentiments. And I colored and cut the bee as usual. He's got a little bit of sparkle in his wings there too. Now I was going to add him to the card with some foam tape, and that made all of the flowers look incredibly flat. So I took that big open bloom stamp in our stamp set, stamped that twice, colored it again to match my original branch of flowers, and then I fussy cut those out, curled up their petals a little bit with my fingers, and glued those over the top of those open blooms on the branch. That gave us a lot of dimension there, really pulled that bee right into that branch of flowers. I, of course, used my little white gel pen to color the ends of all the stamens on the open flowers. You're Beautiful. That's a really great branch of flowers there. I like that it's not just a bouquet, but we actually have a branch going up and showing you what the flowers are growing from. I'm not sure what flowers those are. Are those primroses? Now we also have that honeycomb outline stamp in our stamp set. I wanted to see if I could possibly stamp the entire background of a card in a honeycomb using that stamp. This is what I came up with. We've got Sweet as Can Be with that great outline stamp, making a big panel right across the front of this cardstock. Now, I did practice that on a piece of scrap paper before I took it to my card, and it turns out if you take that honeycomb outline stamp and use it in the direction that it's on your stamp set, it's actually quite easy to get a nice diagonal pattern going there. So you've got an opening there at which that hexagon will fit into that opening right there, and it really fills in nicely, makes a really nice pattern that goes across diagonally across the whole card. I really like that. You can remember that orientation because it's the same orientation that the stamp is presented to us on the stamp set. So when I was happy that I could achieve that, I took a panel of white cardstock and I ink blended some Wild Honey Distress Oxide ink from corner to corner, just ink blended that softly, blended out the edges of that, and then I actually hand stamped, yep, that's right, I did not use a stamp platform. I actually hand stamped that outline hexagon stamp all the way across the front of this card. I was so pleased. I was so scared I was going to stamp that wrong. Once I got that stamped across the whole panel, I die cut that with a L'Enfant stitched rectangle die. I glued that to a very thin mat of Hero Hues mustard cardstock and then down to a white card base. I stamped the Sweet as Can Be again with the intense black ink and did emboss that, of course, with some clear embossing powder. Again, the bee is colored, stamped, and die cut the exact same way as my other bees. I think those golden yellow colors work great, and Harry has a little bit of sparkle on his wings as well. Now, I did take a number of the die-cut hexagons that came from this first ink smooshed panel, and I glued those on the edges of this pattern, filling in all of the blank holes that did not actually get stamped. That made it a nice straight diagonal across this, and for a little extra bling on this card, a little bit of honey shine, I took my Sakura Stardust gel pen and I added a line of glitter on the left and bottom of every one of those hexagons. Gives it a nice little shine there. I think you can see that. Sweet as Can Be. This is a nice little thank you card. I'd open that up and say, thank you so much for being such a sweet bee. Again, those bees are the bee's knees. Now, there's one sentiment that screamed Valentine to me. So for our next card here, we've got a We Belong Together little bee Valentine for you. Now, this heart here is what inspired this card from me. This heart is from an old, this is a Sizzix heart cross stitch cut and emboss die. I have never seen these before, but I think I got this as a freebie in an order. It's long been discontinued. I can't find it anywhere on the web. But when I first got this, I took a piece of dark red cardstock and I die cut it out just so I could see what it looked like. And then I mounted it up next to my desk, and it's been sitting there for months and months and months and months. Well, I looked at it this month, and that little embossing on that actually felt kind of like a beehive, kind of like hexagons. We've got little dots and dashes on that heart. I thought that would be a perfect heart to put on top of some honeycomb and add the bees to that. I took that honeycomb outline stamp and stamped it on the background here using Wild Honey Distress Oxide ink. I stamped it 2 or 3 times to make sure that we got a few of those hexagons poking out on all sides of that heart. I added some more of those little die-cut hexagon pieces from my first card in some of the openings around that background, and then I glued that die-cut heart right down to the center of that. I stamped the sentiment using Wild Honey Distress Oxide ink, and of course I embossed that with some clear embossing powder. I added 2 thin little strips of Hero Hues mustard cardstock to the top and bottom to give a a little bit of a frame to our image here, and then added our two bees. We belong together. Of course, bees, there's tons of bee puns available out there, and I feel like Hero Arts certainly used as many of them as they could on these sentiments. We belong together. I would write Happy Valentine's Day on the inside and give that to my sweetie. Okay, I have one more large sentiment from our stamp set to use. This is the only sentiment that I thought was kind of a forced pun, but I thought if I made the correct card that I could help that pun work. So for card number 7 here, we have a circular slider card for the I've pollen head over heels for you. That bee spins all the way around those flowers, and he certainly does go head over heels. Oh, this is fun. So I took a 4 1/4 by 5 1/2 inch panel of Neenah cardstock, and I stamped our profile flower 3 times right together in the center of that panel and colored those up with my Spectrum Noir alcohol markers. I used Hydrangea HG 1, 2, and 3 for these. I played around with all the purples and the lavenders that are in my Spectrum Noir collection, and the color family that gave me the best purple was actually Hydrangea Blue. Is that right? Yes, Hydrangea Blue, and that's what that gave me really nice purple. I love that purple. Once I colored all of those blooms, I then took the Hero Hues Thistle reactive ink, and I ink blended the edges of that panel all the way around. The little extra on the corners here, I knew I was cutting a circle out of that. I took 2 circle dies from my Hero Arts Nesting Circle Infinity dies. This is the 3-inch circle and the 3 1/2 inch circle. So that's giving us a 1/4 inch of a channel between the two of those that we can put our slider mechanism into. So I taped both of those circle dies to my card panel and ran that through my die cutting machine and cut out that center circle along with that channel. Then I did take some more of that thistle ink and ink blended the edges of that inner circle as well. I went ahead and added foam tape to the edges of our large square panel and around the edges of our circle, taking care to not get so close to the edge here that my penny, which is the weight on the back of my bumblebee, has enough room to slide around so it doesn't bump into any of the foam tape on the edges. That means I have extremely thin foam tape on both sides and the top. This 3 1/2 inch circle is actually getting quite close to the edges of our cardstock. So I was very careful, very thin pieces of foam tape around the edges. Of course, I did do a double layer of foam tape so everything would have plenty of room to move freely. Now, I actually don't have any foam dots in my stash. What? Yeah, I have no foam dots in my collection. So in order to create the little spacer that goes between the penny and your image on a slider card, I just punched out a bunch of little white cardstock circles, just under a 1/4 of an inch. I think I cut 6 of those and I stacked them all on top of each other, glued them very tightly together, and then glued those down to my penny. I stamped the sentiment again using the Thistle Hero Hues reactive ink, and I did emboss that with some clear embossing powder. Then I peeled off the back of our foam tape and glued this down to a white card base. And I took my little penny and slipped it in there, made sure it went around fine, made sure that that little spacer piece was poking up above the edge of the cardstock. And then I added double layers of foam behind the center circle piece and positioned that in place, making sure that the penny and the spacer would go around with no problem. Finally, I took my bee that was stamped, colored, and die cut exactly like all of the others, glued them to the top of that spacer, let everything dry. I've fallen head over heels for you. I don't think I can illustrate this sentiment any better. Now, I am probably going to have to get some foam dots in my stash because I think the foam dots would probably give us just a little bit more friction on the edges, and he might actually spin around and around and around as he went around the circle. But this is just fine. He's head over heels enough as far as I'm concerned. I've fallen head over heels for you. Okay, we've actually used all of the sentiments now. The only sentiment I really haven't used is the little in love sentiment here, which you would pair up with the I believe in love. I thought that was a little close to we belong together, so I skipped the in love. I don't believe in love. Of course I do. But I did feel that was a little redundant. And I did think that the you're beautiful sentiment was adaptable to other beautiful sentiments as well. So on my pink card base, this is the Hero Hues Peony Pink cardstock. We've got have a beautiful day. There's some pink flowers for you and a new sentiment. I actually cut the your away from the your beautiful stamp and stamped the simple beautiful on the center of a white panel, stamped that with some intense black ink and embossed that with some clear embossing powder. And then using my Silhouette software, I ran that through my printer and printed the have a day directly on that card panel using the Lucida Grand font. There's the Give Me a Buzz. I thought that matched very well with the plain block type sentiment in the kit. Have a beautiful day. I was able to turn that Your Beautiful stamp into a Have a Beautiful Day sentiment. I stamped our branch of flowers on the two sides of that panel and colored those up with my Zig Clean Color Real Brush markers. This is all done on a piece of Bristol Smooth cardstock. I knew I wanted to use my Zig markers to color this, give us a nice light pink flower, and do this up for all of my pink fans out there. After coloring, I die cut that panel with a Lawn Fawn stitched rectangle die, added a thin mat of that black glitter cardstock we got in our kit, added two more of those bees, both stamped, colored, and die cut exactly like all of the others. They have little touches of sparkle on their wings. Have a beautiful day. I think there's probably lots of options for that beautiful word on many different sentiments. And of course, you can always stick the U back together with the beautiful and stamp it as it was originally intended. Okay, now we can play a little bit more. I was thinking about this card from the first time I saw this kit. For my 9th card, we've got a Be Yourself with our little busy beehive here with one purple bee on top. Yes, be yourself. And of course, there's a little more on the inside. Do your own sting. I was really interested in trying to get a swarm of bees on this card, and I still hadn't used that 3 hexagon filler stamp that was in our stamp set. So I practiced a little bit on some plain paper and realized that those stamps would make a nice, lovely border using my Hero Arts Misty and sliding the paper over 3/4 of an inch for each impression. Of course, then I just flipped that stamp around and stamped it again, scooting the paper 3/4 of an inch each time to create this final perfect little double band of hexagons to give us our little beehive. I then stamped, colored, and die cut 10 of these little bees. These are all the top view bees. Took all 10 of those bees and arranged those in the opening between our two honeycombs so that they were covering up the white space, but were not actually on top of each other. Now, on these bees, I actually added a little bit of blue turquoise one along with the true blue one to kind of dull down the blue a little bit in their wings. I think it makes them look a little bit more like they're busy working away. I again colored this bee using my hydrangea blue 123 alcohol markers and added him to the top of the pile there with some foam tape so he sticks out a little bit above everybody else. The sentiments, of course, I printed on the inside and the outside before I added any of the bees to it. I used my Silhouette software and the Rostilla font for the front, Be Yourself, and for the inside, Do Your Own Sting. I love this pun, do your own sting. That gives me big giggles. Of course, once that was all printed, then I could glue down all of my bees and add my one popped up purple bee on top of that. Be yourself. Do your own sting. You can almost hear this card buzzing. I had the idea for this card fairly early on as well and wanted to save it to the end because who would have thought that you could get a Christmas card out of this bee-themed kit. But here we are, card number 10, and we've got Oh, Christmas bee, oh, Christmas bee. With our lovely red and green Christmas bee right in the middle there. This card tickles me to no end. Oh, Christmas bee, oh, Christmas bee. It's never too early to start working on this year's Christmas cards. I took a panel of white cardstock and I printed this sentiment, again using my Silhouette software. Remember that software is free, and I will have a link to that on my website at cardcutups.com. I use the Lucida Grand font again, matches up the plain block fonts on our sentiments very nicely. I printed that in the center of that panel. I die cut that panel with a lawn fawn stitched rectangle die, added a thin red mat and a thin green mat, and glued those down to my white card base. Now I stamped this bee using archival ink in vermilion, red archival ink. I stamped this whole bee with red archival ink. Now I wanted to use a permanent ink so I can add a little bit of shadow to the red stampings and not worry about smearing or washing out the ink. So I used permanent ink for that. Then I used my alcohol markers to add the green in the open spaces. And then I took a Pigma Micron pen. This is the 03 size. And I traced over the bee's legs and his antenna and his outline and the wings and little spaces between his colors there, and turned the remainder of that red stamping black. So it looks like it's been stamped in black and then colored in red and green. I thought that was so much fun. For a little Christmas glitter, I added some of my Sakura glitter pen to his wings there. That gives us some nice sparkle. I die cut him out and mounted him on the card front using some foam tape. Oh, Christmas bee, oh, Christmas bee. I actually have a good friend that lives outside of Boston who actually is a beekeeper and has a nice bee colony out in their yard. I may just have to save this for their Christmas card this next year. Oh, Christmas bee, oh, Christmas bee. Who'da thunk it? So that's my 10 cards I created using the My Monthly Hero January 2021 kit. I had such a great time with this kit. I love those little chunky bee stamps. Obviously, everyone else loves them too because this kit sold out like hotcakes. Bang! It was gone before you could turn around. If you want to avoid missing some of these terrific kits from Hero Arts, I would certainly suggest subscribing. You have a month-to-month option, a 3-month option, a 6-month option. I'll have links to all those subscription sites down below. Please use my links when you go to Hero Arts. It really does help keep my head above water during these trying times. times. I'm very pleased with all of these cards. I did use every stamp in this stamp set except for the In Love stamp right there. And I'm sure all those chubby bees and those great flowers will come in handy over the years. Not only did I have a great time coloring these images, but I had so much fun coming up with hopefully some unique ways to illustrate these sentiments. I extend heartfelt thanks to all of you for sharing your precious time with me here. Your support and encouragement means so much to me, especially during these trying times. Please take a moment to like me, list me, pin me, post me, share me with all of your friends, and remember the wisdom of the poet William Blake, who said, "The busy bee has no time for sorrow." I send you and yours health and best wishes for a great new year. And as always, I wish you happy crafting. For more detailed information, better pictures, and product links, please visit my website at cardcutups.com.